Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest round of the FRS in Season 7 here in Division 1 for Round 6 in Montreal, Canada at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for the Canadian Grand Prix. This circuit then, a street circuit in the middle of a park in the middle of the city. It has 14 turns with 3 sectors, 3 DRS zones as well, but only 2 detection points. If you get that detection point down into the 3rd sector, you get it all the way down the back straight and the start-finish straight as well, even if you are past. Not much elevation on this particular circuit either, and with a time loss of only 16 seconds, Canada features the smallest pit lane loss of the season as you filter out of the pit lane and straight into turn number 2. In terms of our action zones, turns 1 and 2, these are some of the big ones, as down that DRS straight you will go in towards the first corner, and then you have the opportunity to get it up the inside, around the outside in turn number 1, and then it flips back on itself in turn number 2, so plenty of opportunities there for good close racing. Turn number 10, another great one, into the hairpin here, very long hairpin as well, slow speed, so therefore you're going to be looking at setting yourself up as well as you can out onto the back straight. In terms of our tyres, not much of a big difference in the tyres this week. In terms of their overall speed, 0.6 per lap slower than the soft for the medium and 1.1 seconds slower than the soft for the hards. And the softs, much more viable as a race tyre this time. 11 laps you can go on those, 20 on the mediums, 27 on the hards. But with all that said and done then, let's head our way down to the circuit, and then we will get ourselves watching what is going on out there with our drivers now exiting the garages and going out onto the circuit. And here we are. My name then is Daniel Gilligan. Thank you very much for joining us here today. I am joined in the virtual commentary box, as ever, by my co-commentator extraordinaire, the quintessentially wonderful Quimbulus. I didn't quite get that one right there for you, Sean. But there we go. Sean Preventer, everybody.
It's good to be here. It's a good effort to try and pull 2 QU adjectives out. I think getting 1 was even a solid start to begin with, so I'll give you credit for that. But yeah, it looks like the sun is out as our first drivers are. Looks like Ruprath is going to be one of the first to start his flying lap. Of course, so important to get the final chicane correct to start your lap and carry speed. But we will let's ride on board while we take our first look at the circuit at full pelt.
Absolutely, yes indeed, and we've got Ruprath then out there and getting us set off and started for this one. The Haas then is looking very racy at the moment. They're able to bring a lot of speed through turns 1 and 2, a bit wide of the apex in 3, 4, and then as we start to go through 5, then 6, and down in towards 7, this then is one of these tricky areas on the circuit then as we go through 8, where you then have all these corners layering up after one another. There's an awful lot of rhythm when it comes to this circuit. It's been likened to as like a karting circuit here, and then as we go through 8 and 9, we then go up over the rise here. Again, not much elevation, but there's a little bit of a crest here before you go down in towards turn number 10. Great big hairpin there, and that's if I'm getting these numbers correct. I may not be, but we know that there's 14 turns, so they're out of 12. We'll call this one rather 11. That one's 12, we'll call it, and then down into the chicane, that'll be 13, 14. I'm going to say that I've got that all right. So, down towards 13, 14, into that final chicane, need to carry a lot of speed through here, not invalidate the lap, and crucially, not hit the wall of champions. Then straight line the car all the way to the start-finish line, and across the line. Ruprath gives us our first time of the day with a 1:11.2. Immediately beaten by their teammate, Chicken Sucker, by 1/10, or less than a tenth, in fact, 1:11.193.
Cruzo onto a 1:11.2, so right there in the mix. Has typically struggled in qualifying sessions so far this season, but getting up towards the front at least to start it.
Absolutely, but the times are now starting to come in thick and fast, and we've got Clem then fastest of all at the moment with the 1:10.4. We've got Wild Poros in the Ferrari in 3rd place now, as Major Castleman has jumped into 2nd place, so the 1:10.4 as well. They're just a few hundredths off of their teammate, Red Bull 1-2 for now. In terms of MJ Povey, they are currently out on an outlap. They're coming up towards the line now. Let's see what the Williams is able to do. One of our championship protagonists up to the line, and it's pole provisionally for MJ Povey. And there is still over 14 minutes left to go in this session. Still plenty of time to get some lap times on the board here. And we've got them then in a 1:10.1, so 3/10 clear of Clem and Castleman behind. But, of course, nobody in that second Williams seat anymore after Nemesis has rage quit from the series and from the league. And so they are flying the Williams flag solo today. Won't have a teammate to act as rear gunner. Won't have somebody to help them along. In terms of then the Alpine, you can see on screen at the moment, this is Cryptic F1 coming through the last couple of corners. Then win the Alpine. They're going to have a nice little bit of a toe potentially. No, they tuck to the inside to get that shortest run to the corner. And it's P5 for Cryptic then, just ahead of their teammate F50, who slots in P6. Queasy Pluto, though, is got a lap time done as well, and they're up in P4. And then we're on board with Mako. No, not with Mako, with Luke at the moment in the Aston Martin. Again, a bit of a strange thing to see Luke not in a Red Bull. This week, though, instead of papaya colours, they've gone for the green colours. Glory supporter, obviously. Dear, oh dear. And into the hairpin they go then at turn number 10. They're going to navigate their way through there. And up towards the line, there will go. Of course, one of our one-lap specialists here in the FRS is Luke. And we'll see whether or not they finish out this lap or whether they go into the pits. They've already tried one lap and it's not worked out for them. But here they go into the final chicane then, keeping it in a high gear. And through they go up towards the line. What is it going to be for Luke this time? It's going to be good, and it's very good, in fact. P2, 110.3 for Luke.
That is quite the rapid lap. And yeah, it was a little odd to see Luke in various colors throughout this season, but first runs are done for just about everybody. I think Alfie's going to try and finish up, even though that rear light was flashing. So probably not ideal on deployment, although the timer also says a minute 55. So it's a valid lap. It's just 50 seconds off the pace. But so far, after the first runs, everybody bar one has set a valid lap so far. And it looks like Ruprath might be one of the first getting back out there for another lap. And the bar one is Habs fan Nick, who is, as we said in the pre-show, kind of best of the rest right now, sitting about 30 points off the championship leading trio, but is at the sharp end of that midfield battle.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. And now, as we go down into the next few corners, we're watching Ruprath at the moment, but just behind them on the circuit, we've got Alfie still on what seems to be a lap here, because they had a lot of ERS in reserve as they came across the start-finish line and got this lap underway, and it's been slowly draining over the course of the lap. So either this is the quickest in-lap in history, or they're going for a significantly quicker attempt on a second lap on the same set of tyres, a bit similar to what we saw some other drivers doing earlier on. So up towards the final chicane they come. Through that final couple of corners they go, and they invalidate right at the death. And so that then means they will not set a faster lap time on this set of tyres, unless they decide to go for a third time lap, but that I think would be inadvisable. So it was 41 seconds quicker, despite the fact that they went significantly slower over the line there, basically coming to a stop over the final chicane. Sorry, it's been a long day. I've done 4 hours of Nürburgring, and I've done 2 hours of CRC commentary before all of this, so this is now going into my 7th hour of commentary here today. But yes, we've got then Ruprath currently on a lap, and they are currently making a good impression on this one. We'll wait to see what the second sector split is here, or the third sector split, I should say. As to come up towards the split there, 7/10 up on their previous best. That's significantly better. That gets them around about where Queasy Pluto is. But we've got one more sector of potential improvement to go here. So for the Haas driver, up towards the line there will go. And DRS opens up for them immediately as they reach across the DRS threshold. Down towards the final chicane they will go then. And as we head into that final chicane then, through the final couple of corners, up to the line, we've got the DRS open. And as they get there, it just seems to lose a bit of something as they come across the line. I think there may have been connection issue for Ruprath, possibly, as their car was starting to bounce across all over the screen on my end there. I'm not sure about on the main feed for you there, Sean, but yeah, ended up being a 6/10 improvement in the end. And across the line comes Habs van Nick to start their first time lap.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a wiggle going on, but I mean, Canada's such a tough circuit. You can improve so much through the first and second sectors, but literally the last pair of corners, the chicane that leads into the Wall of Champions there, it's one of the toughest ones to get right. Oh, big snap from Nick, and somehow doesn't hit the barriers as Povey actually improves on his provisional pole time. So goes into first man into the 1:09 9s. But as I was saying, you can do so much work throughout the entire lap and then just invalidate in the last corner, as we've seen, because you kind of have to push to get there. Let me see if I can find somebody who's on a flying lap. I believe Bonhomie is. They've got the DRS open. We haven't seen much of Bonhomie in the Alpha Tauri, but putting up some decent performances throughout the season. Looking to score a few more points, you'd say, this week.
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to get some more points on the board it would be a good way of getting some forward momentum in this championship and in the teams championship as well, where we've got the two divisions, of course, all their points pooling into one singular championship, in addition to their own leagues, drivers and constructors championships. So away we go then. And Bonhomie then comes through the final chicane. Too much indeed from Bonhomie. And that means that they are in the wall. They lose the front left corner. And that means then that the rest of the field is going to have a brief period of time where they're going to need to be very careful coming out the final turn to make sure that they don't end up collecting that car there. So through the final corner comes one of the Hasses there, and that being Chicken Sucker up towards the line. There you go, P10 for Chicken Sucker as they get over the line there. And that then potentially a compromised final turn owing to the AlphaTauri being on the road there. But the AlphaTauri has now been cleared. Green flags in that section of the circuit. And, well, that was certainly one way of finishing your lap, wasn't it?
And literally just after talking about how difficult that final corner is, not only to get right as far as track limits, but getting the power down because you want to get to the line as fast as you can, and a little bit too much right foot, maybe even picking up a little bit of dirty air with the Ferrari starting a lap just ahead of them. They were pretty close. Might have gotten a bit of benefit on the toe down the back straight, but might have hampered their grip a little bit through that final corner. We're on board here with Castleman, though, who's just winding up for a lap, leading the championship by 6 points over MJ Povey, but right now sitting second row and behind their own teammate. Are we at the point in the season where team orders for the championship may be something that's discussed between the Red Bull pair, or do you think they're still going hammer and tongs?
I think that the Red Bull should still be fighting hard. I think that anything else, and we're robbed of a potential championship battle. I mean, if the pace is there for Clem, who is, of course, behind in the points, but still able to push and get some good results in, then yeah, absolutely, why not? I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have some good fighting between the Red Bull teammates, but of course, we have now completed a number of races this season. This is round 6, as we said at the beginning here, so we are about halfway through, and so I would say maybe we want to wait until around about round 9 or 10 would realistically be where you'd want to start implementing team orders and things like that. But I tell you what, from that latest run, whilst Castleman did improve there, they didn't improve quite as much as Cryptic F1, they didn't improve as much as Clem, and they certainly didn't improve as much as MJ Povey. MJ Povey now the only driver down the 109s here today.
Yeah, definitely put together very quick laps already. I think we're going to grab F50 as he's on his way into the final chicane. Is he going to find some time? A little bit slow. I don't think he's already over his previous lap time, so he might have been just starting up his flying lap, as it does love to remove the outlap indicator on the timing tower when drivers enter the third sector, so you don't, unless you're paying attention to the first 2 sectors for every single driver, it can be a little tough to decide who's on the flyer and who's on the outlap. But invalidated turn 3, so that's the end of that lap, and we'll see if we can grab anybody else. Maybe Mako is potentially on a lap, has found about half a second in the first sector.
It looks to me as though, in addition to Mako, their teammate, who's actually a bit further up the road, so if we could have a look at them first before we finish out with Mako here.
Indeed, correct. Luke has found a 10th through the first 2 sectors.
Yeah. Looking very good so far, and as they head up towards the final chicane, then this, I think, maybe where they would have gotten it wrong on their previous attempt at a fast lap, because these tyres have been used before and there's a big slide. That then might be curtains as far as improving this lap time is concerned. It is an improvement, but not by very much at all. So unfortunately for them, it is still P5 in this one, but there's still just under 5 minutes. There's still loads of time in this session, so Luke should be able to get back into the pits, fresh set of tyres on, and now as we watch their teammate Mako coming across the line, let's see whereabouts they go then. It's not going to be quite as quick as their teammate, but it is an improvement by 1/10 of a second. So, good improvements there. If they can keep chipping away at it and get themselves down into the 10s, as they're now 1:11.0, then that could be another good one then. Alfie has been able to set a time and get themselves a bit further up the way there versus that 1:55 they had earlier on, 1:11.9. So, not as quick as we saw them on their disallowed lap, but maybe this is the plan. Maybe just reel it back in a little bit, and then go for the quick lap a little bit later on, possibly.
Yeah, it looks like Queasy's on a charge-up lap, so we will jump off. And that is camera cursing Elliott. As soon as I switch to him, he's facing the wrong way through turn 3. So tough day continuing for them. And it looks like, if I'm looking at the map, the next driver furthest around is, I want to say, Cruzo on their out lap. Because otherwise, I know both of the Aston and both of the Alphas. However, may keep an eye on Alfie because they have shown a propensity to do multiple laps. Although, I think they should probably just come back in and get some new tires real quick. It's a short lap, one of the shorter ones of the season. Only, as you can see, about 1:10 on quali. And then it's a short pit lane, as we've mentioned. And there are two people, both on Xbox, that have been disconnected. While the outlaps are going on, I'm going to send those guys invites real quick. Stand by.
Okay. Very good, very good. I shall provide the ladies and gents with some radio commentary in the meantime. Just come out of the pits now. Habs fan Nick, currently down in P17, back of the field. Now, Nick has been incredibly quick all season long. They have been quick Nick, you could say. And they've been threatening the podium, threatening even the win on one occasion, and the podium a number of times this season. I think that it's been one of these things where they're not the outright quickest of drivers on the field, but they certainly do have a great deal of consistency, which a lot of the other drivers lack, I feel. So definitely one to keep an eye on. We're also looking, of course, at Crusoe. Crusoe having a much, much more convincing race weekend so far than what we've seen for them elsewhere in this season. They're currently about 100th up on their personal best, which would get them no improvement in their position, but at least if they can continue this on, they can keep getting some good time and finding that time.
They've taken a little bit too much in turn 7, though, and have invalidated.
Shame. But they are at least early on enough in the lap where they can turn the ERS down into harvest mode. They can then just save up and not take too much out the tyres, and then they can go for a second time lap immediately after this one. Might be their only other opportunity to get it done, as we now have just about 2 minutes left in the session. Nick comes across the line, and they're going to start a lap around this circuit. So if we jump on board with them, let's see what the Ferrari driver is able to do. So out through turns 1, 2, and 3 we go, into turn number 4 then. And they've been able to get themselves hooked in nicely. MJ Povey is back in the session with just enough time to be able to get themselves back out and go for another attempt to improve their lap time. But as we stick on board with Nick then, and they go through these next couple of corners here then, so through 6 and 7, we go down towards 8 and 9 next, and as we see here, Cryptic has left the session again, and I think that might be just more prevalent connection issues for them. But as Nick goes up and over the rise, then down towards the third sector split, they're 8.7 seconds up on their previous best time. That gets them into around the 11s or maybe even the 10s, and so we're looking at a good improvement, good jump in time. If Nick can get themselves into the 10s on this lap, then the field is so tightly packed in terms of the 110 times, they should be able to get themselves at least on par with their teammate, while Poros up in P7 at the moment for the lead Ferrari. Through the final chicane they come then, and it looks all nice and stable, nice and calm and collected for Habs fan Nick. Up to the line they come, and it is a 9.8 second improvement with a 1:10.4 dead, and that puts them ahead of their teammate, while Poros. Nick reclaims the title of lead Ferrari for now.
Yeah, and there's yellow flags in the second sector, and that was caused by Wild Poros spinning in the second half of the lap there. So he was on his flying lap, and I don't think he's going to get much out of it. Povey, unfortunately, because of the connections, unable to get a final flying lap, and we'll keep an eye on Clem, although I actually may jump to Castleman. I think he's the lead Red Bull at the moment, a little further up the track, so we'll switch over and take a look. For Cryptic, he was saying that when he got loaded back in, he was stuck in the halo cam, so he was trying to jump out and back in. He wasn't going to be able to get his final flying run in. Castleman has found a 1/10 of a second. He's got to find quite a bit more in the final sector, of course, so look for him to potentially go absolutely full send over the Wall of Champions. In fact, I'm going to ride on board to see what kind of line he opts to take here.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's watch then as the Red Bull tackles this final chicane. How aggressive are they? Very aggressive, as it turns out, right up to the wall. Straight lining towards the Wall of Champions. It was a significant thing, but not significant enough.
And
as
Clem is around.
MJ Povey was able to get themselves an improvement, Major Castleman is able to get themselves a major improvement as well. But Clem, as you can see then on the screen there, spinning around in the final corner, and that then means it is all curtains for them. Queasy Pluto has finished out their session too. Luke and Habsan Nick are both in the pits, while Poros is a driver who might be able to improve as well. We'll wait and see on that one. And let's wait and see for what happens with Ruprath as well. Ruprath up towards the line in the Haas, trying to straight line it as much as they possibly can, and it is P6 in the end for them. While Poros then, currently P9, currently still valid as they come through the final chicane. Up towards the line goes Wild Poros, and what will it be? It is an improvement, and they just managed to sneak back ahead of Habs fan Nick. The Ferrari intra-team battle is looking like a very competitive, very spicy one indeed.
Yeah, it was right up to the very end. I think he was derating a little bit as he crossed the line, so I'm trying to send Cryptic another invite just before we get to the end of the session. I just wanted to keep things on cameras, but with everybody in the pits and the checkered flag out, this is your runner. So Povey caught out by that disconnect, but still holds down to that pole position by just barely over half a tenth of a second.
Yeah, and they were able to improve somewhere as well, because their original time was, of course, a 109.9 something. So they're now in the 109.8, and I think that if they hadn't gotten that small improvement somewhere, then it could well have been Major Castman on pole.
Yeah, it was really, really close. And of course, Clem having to send it over the final chicane to try and get back ahead of Castleton. But I mean, you look at how close the midfield spread is. I mean, once you get even Queasy's quarter of a second off pole, 0.264 for Cryptic, it's really close up and down the field this time.
Absolutely, yes. So there's confirmation of your order then. We have MJ Povey on pole, then Major Castman alongside. Then we've got Clem, Queasy Pluto, Cryptic, Ruprath, Luke, Wild Poros, Habsfan Nick, F50, Cruzo, Chicken Sucker, Gali, Bonhomie, Mako, Elliot, and Alfie at the back of the grid. But with the outlier of Alfie's time, and Alfie having a bit of a rough session there, let's be honest, everybody within 1.2 seconds of each other. That's very close. That's almost as close as in Formula One during Q1 last week, of course, in Bahrain, where they set the record for the closest that field has ever been in Q1. It was 1.1 something seconds between all those drivers there. So I tell you what, then, for our drivers to all be within similar sort of a pace to one another, we should have a nice competitive race here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult track to overtake on. There's some clouds definitely in the sky.
There's clouds, and if you notice in the pit lane, next to all of our T-posing mechanics, I'm not sure if you're running the same visual settings as me, but I can see there's just ever so slight glint. There's a slight sort of moist texture to the pit lane there.
It looks interesting. Let's put it that way. And of course, short pit lane, as we talked about. Very little. I'm running pretty high settings here. And
have you got RTX on?
I don't recall. I'd have to check after the game.
Okay. So I know I've got RTX on, so maybe that's where the difference in it is. So we've probably both got the highest settings, but then maybe you may not have RTX. Who knows? It's all speculation. It's all useless speculation and good filler whilst we wait for the drivers to ready up and get themselves sorted out.
I'll give them half. I'll give Div 1 half credit. There was some waiting. It was about 40 seconds worth of waiting, but it was a lot more than instantly readying up like they've done every single other week. See, in Division 2, we do smart things and have done all season. We have a upvote if you're ready in the Div 2 channel, and we don't go until people ready up in there.
Excellent. So, away we go then. And, well, Povey spins at the beginning. This after there's already been a discussion about stopping spins on the formation lap. Povey, being an admin, knows that is the case.
That was unintentional.
Whether it was, yeah, I would hope that it was.
Hard tires, and yeah, it is a little bit of a shiny looking surface. You can actually see a little bit of reflection of the cars. Everybody's on dry compound tires. Most drivers on the medium. That's kind of the default. That's the default strategy the game give you is the hards first. But interesting choices. And we will see if the rain does indeed come. So Povey's going to have to work his way back up through the field to pull into his grid box eventually. And that means Major Castleman is on the medium tires.
So they should get a good launch off of the line, should Castleman, if they're able to get their tyres up to temperature. That might give them the run that they need to get by Povey, because then, of course, with the way in which you line up on the grid here, Povey will be on the racing line, but the racing line, of course, draws over to the left-hand side and then pulls back over to the right as you go down towards turn number 1. So given that is the case, as we've also got Ruprath round, it seems, as well, on the formation lap. But yes, as the drivers then get themselves ready to go, it will then be a case that we'll have, basically, as long as they're able to get a good launch, Castleman should then have the inside line down towards turn number 1, which then will become the outside, of course, but it will be on the racing line. So they should be able to brake later and then go all the way around the outside of Povey. And then, of course, in turn 2, it goes back on itself. It's a dogleg corner. So therefore, we should see Castleman and Povey alongside, maybe on the run down through 3 and up towards turn number 4. We will wait and see. Povey then shifts their way through the matrix past Clem and takes their slot at the front of the grid, and we get ready to go racing here in the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve.
And Clem and Povey setting with a bit of an angle into their grid boxes since it does kind of bend to the right, so hopefully being able to accelerate in more of a straight line. Looks like the last couple of drivers getting ready and slotted into their grid boxes.
3, 4, 5 red lights here in Canada. Lights out, and it's go, 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 and it looks like a very good start for Major Castleman alongside, and they are going to have the lead down to turn 1, but will it be 3 wide? Will it be Red Bulls contact with one another? No, not quite, and Povey manages to maintain second place. They lose the pole initially, but now then they are followed by a fast-charging Clem behind, and meanwhile Castleman has had the start of their life to jump up into the lead of this one and start to build out a bit of a gap. Yeah. Meanwhile, a bit further back, we can see here that we've got Wild Porous making great leaps up the field, up into P5, and their teammate having fallen down the order.
Yeah, Cryptic had a huge snap of oversteer on the exit of turn 2, trying to come up the hill. It's a pretty low grip section, but yeah, a lot of movement down in the mid pack here. It looks like Luke might be sizing up a move on Wild Poros now, so it's getting very, very nip and tuck. We'll see what kind of strategies and setups drivers have gone for. It's very tricky in overtaking here, but of course, if you want to set up for that downforce, there's lots of corners to utilize it. So who's fast in a straight line, who's fast in the corners, and is that going to turn into some people being stuck on straights?
Exactly, yeah. It's a circuit that in some ways is not too dissimilar to Bahrain in that sense, in that the second sector, a bit more tight and twisty, a bit more downforce required in there. But then the first and third sectors, very much straight line operations.
Ooh, a kiss of the wall from Cruzo.
Cruzo and Nick went side by side in the final corner there, and it didn't quite end up working out for either one of them. Both of them ending up receiving huge damage. Cruzo no front wing on their wagon, no front wing, I think,
because of all the debris.
Yeah, so there we go then. That is that. And yeah, Nick also without a front wing on their wagon. So if you're on the medium tire at this stage, this gives you a free opportunity to switch over onto the hards. And if you feel as though your strategy is just not working out on that first lap versus those on the hards. But of course, if you're on those mediums or you're on the hards or whatever it happens to be, then at this stage, early race safety car, strategies don't really change all that much. It's if we then get a second one in very quick succession afterwards, that's when you might want to then start thinking about a change in your strategy. But as it is then, Castleman at the lead of the field by 2 seconds, so they've been able to gap Povey very well with those medium tyres. Given that there's not a huge offset in terms of the grip of those tyres, as we saw in the pre-race show, of course. We had 0.6 of a second off of the soft for the mediums and 1.1 off of the softs for the hards. So the difference between the two tyres there that we see on all the cars at the moment is only 0.5 of a second. And yet, despite that, Castleman was able to really utilize all of what the tyre was able to give them and more to be able to pull out a significant lead at the end of the first lap.
Yeah, plenty of good grip. I mean, you can really rag the medium tires around this circuit. You can push them quite hard. They're pretty resilient, honestly. It's about you can do almost 20 laps on those medium tires, and considering it's a 35-lap race, and the hards can go about 27, so it's not a huge difference in life either. For whatever reason, the game kind of is even Stevens almost between the hards and the mediums. But yeah, the mediums give you just that little bit of extra purchase, and Castleman did well to use it. I thought could have been 3 wide down there in turn 1 there, but I think Castleman got far enough ahead that it was just the Povey versus Clem battle, and luckily Povey able to just hold on. But a tough start in the home race for Habs fan Nick. First time going side by side through the final chicane, and there's just a little bit of contact, and it pushed Cruzo a little bit wide, and then Cruzo kind of came off the wall with Habs fan Nick still beside him. And, well, it's a real tough corner even in the best of circumstances to go side by side in. And lap 1, heavy fuel, not fully up to temperature tires. It's just a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Certainly is. Certainly is. And yeah, just one of these things where unfortunately sometimes it can be ambition over adhesion, as Martin Bundle likes to say. and unfortunately the grip can run out like that. Now, I just had a quick glance at the standings for the PC Division 1. Unfortunately, the coordinators have not updated the results there. Now, I don't know if there's any pending stewards reports for the last race, and if there are, then I'm certainly not aware of it, and so on. But I'm assuming that all stewards inquiries are done for PC Division 1, and so, yeah, a bit of a shame that we don't have those up-to-date results, but certainly last time round, before we went to Azerbaijan, the gap was only 3 points between Castleman and Povey, and I think, I might be wrong, because my memory is famously terrible, but I think that Povey did end up having the worst of the two results there. So that gap should have increased at the head of the field.
He did. I did a little bit of back of the napkin math in setting up the standings tables for the broadcast. And so as it sits, at least according to my math, and I'm pretty sure all the stewards' inquiries are in, I took as many of those into account as I could. Castleman's on 87 points in the lead of the championship with his second place finish last week. Povey on 81 with a third place finish. So they did lose some ground. Of course, Clem won that race and clawed back some of the gap. They sit third on 73. So 87, 81, 73 is the top three drivers. Habs van Nick in that best of the rest position is on 41 points. So a 32-point gap back to them. So it is still kind of a three-horse race at the moment. And you can see that, well, the three-horse race is in the championship order as it stands.
Certainly is. And then the message which makes me very happy, because I've already seen 7 safety cars today, including this one. This safety car will be in at the end of this lap, and hopefully it's the only time we'll see it all race long. But it's Canada, it's the FRS. I have a funny feeling it may make at least one more appearance, although I would much prefer the virtual safety car if that were the case. So Major Castleman then takes over as the de facto safety car. Povey has created a bit of a gap to the car in front of them, which is not necessarily what you want to be happening there. And we wait for the safety car to peel back into the pit lane. It's now in the pit lane, so at any point from now, Castleman could go. They're weaving this way and that. They're keeping Povey guessing, but they go now. And it's an early dive from Major Castleman. They've left Povey a little bit napping there. Bit of oversteer on exit as well. Oh, big slide for Queasy.
He's not in the wall, but he's facing the wrong way. He's going to go all the way to the back of the field as the entire field passes him.
Absolutely, yep. Not what they will have wanted to happen at all there on the restart, but at least it's only yellow flags and not a safety car again. And so we have green flags once more, and we are racing here in Canada. Now, the gap then, as they go through turns 4 and 5, is now 9/10 of a second at the head of the field. And look at this then. We've got the Alfa Romeo very close to Habs. Wait, no, hang on. That's not the Habs van Nick, and that is Alfie going side by side. And they managed to get the move done there on the Alpine, getting ahead of F50 and defending the position nicely too. And so things are still very close to that. This field, Chicken Sucker very close to the back of their teammate Ruprath. About a half a second between those two. Luke is also on a bit of a charge at the moment too. Just 4 tenths behind Wild Poros. And Luke with those medium tyres should have a bit more grip at this stage and should therefore be able to get chasing after them and make something happen. We'll see then what the difference is in terms of the offset between these two cars on the back straight rather is, as there's no DRS at this stage because we've just had a full safety car as Nick manages to get by Crusoe and then Crusoe back by Nick in the run up onto the final straight. But as we keep our eyes on Luke then, they are close but not quite close enough to mount a challenge to Wild Poros at the moment. That indicates to me then that maybe Poros has got more straight line speed built into their setup than Luke does.
And this time, Habs fan Nick and Crusoe navigate the Wall of Champions safely, very much eased up. But you can see how much ground Bonhomie took out of them because they were going so slow to go side by side. Just wanted to keep an eye on that one as it happened because, well, they caused the first safety car together in that corner. And as soon as they went back to green flag racing, they went side by side through it right again. And that is the FRS way. Oh, big snap from Cryptic. Oh, he's going to be near the racing line. He just about gathers the car up before it comes all the way onto the racing line. And apparently I'm just finding the spinners today.
You are. Usually I'm pretty good at that sort of a thing, but I've
and
missed
now Habs has a run on Cryptic down into another chicane. A little contact, a snap. Habs and Nick has to cut across. And he's not able to gather up the car over the bumps, and Cryptic is around as well. I think there's damage for both of those throughout that, but as we go forward, it's a virtual safety car. No full safety car has been called. Luke was sizing up a run on Wild Poros. The gap had gotten down to about 1/10 of a second and has to back out with the VSC, but Habs fan Nick just side by side all day with people and little touches here and there, and he tried to take the escape route, but there's a big bump when you get off of that last chicane, or not last, second to last chicane, and it just upset the car significantly. And after Habsha, Nick, taking damage, pitting, crawled his way back almost to the top 10 after the restart, and is now once again going through. It looks like Nick may have avoided damage. He's opted to skip the pit lane. Cryptic is in, though. We'll see. It should be back to green flag racing relatively soon if my internal VSC clock is working.
Internal VSC clock. That's the best phrase I've heard all day. And I was commentating on a race earlier on with a gamer tag in there of the Lotion Man. So there we go. The bar was set high and you've still beaten it there, Sean. But here we go then. Should be green flag racing relatively soon. Now, you're absolutely right. The VSC tends to stay out a lot shorter amount of time than a full safety car does. But at least here around Gilles Villeneuve circuit, it's a very short circuit. We don't have to be waiting too long with the full safety car. And we seem to be waiting a bit longer than usual with the virtual safety car. Now, hopefully, we will get that going. Yes, there we go. Green flag racing. DRS has been re-enabled because, of course, unlike a full safety car, when the DRS is deactivated during a virtual safety car period, it's immediately reactivated. You don't have to wait the 3 laps. And so that means it's open on the back of Luke's Aston Martin, and down towards turn number 1 they go. Up the inside. They then have to give the racing room to the Ferrari on the inside. But now, with those medium tyres on the racing line, big slide though. Big slide for Luke. And that now means that down in towards turn number 4, well, Boris has gone back ahead. Brilliant bit of racing between the two of these guys. Nice and clean, given the room, given all the respect between each other.
Yeah, and Luke just needs to wait for a good moment. He's still got tire advantage. The mediums versus the hard. You can see the exits he's able to get from some of these corners. And also, it's a lot easier to get those tires up to temperature after a VSC. DRS open now should be fully clear by the time they hit the brakes into the chicane. And indeed, they've got it. But now, will Wild Poros get them back? The gap's out at the front, though. Over a second for all of the top 3. So the battles are really hotting up in the midfield. But the front 3 just kind of holding station.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're looking then at, things staying relatively stagnant, which is a bit of a shock, really, for Major Castleman, because, of course, they are now going to have to be thinking to themselves, oh, no, I'm not pulling away at the rate that I was before. Are these mediums maybe starting to be a bit past their best? Meanwhile, in this battle between Luke and Wild Poros, we're seeing then that Luke gets a very good exit off of the corner. And so despite DRS on the Ferrari, they're not able to close up at all on the run down towards turn number 1. So Luke is very much protected up in P4. And with those mediums, if they're able to start executing the sort of pace we saw from them in qualifying, then we should start to see them close in on those ahead and maybe even start to spice things up in that fight for the podium.
Yeah, another tire differential battle a little further down. Cruzo on the mediums behind Elliott on the hard compound tires. And
great exit from Cruzo.
Is he going to challenge into this left-hand hairpin? He's using a lot of battery. There's a little bit of a look. Elliott leaves about a half a car's width of space. He didn't need to leave any space at all, but just to avoid the potential engine, it's kept them out of trouble. But Cruzo literally pushing Elliott through this straight here.
Absolutely, yeah. You can see they're having to just duck out from the from right behind the AlphaTauri to spot the braking point, to be able to see where the best place to slow the car down is. A great exit again. It seems on traction. The medium tire runners have a good purchase.
Oh, big slide. He was deep on the entry, tried to get on the power too early. Little contact with Queasy. I don't know if Queasy...
Dude, that was a dangerous rejoin there. They've made contact with Habs fan Nick for the second time in this race. Nick, fortunately, doesn't appear to have any damage as a result of that, but... oh, dear. Cruzo.
While we were watching that, Clem appears to have gotten a bit of a shift on from about 1.2 seconds down to about 7/10 on Povey, who hasn't lost a whole lot of ground to Castleman. So Clem turned in quite a couple of corners and has gotten himself back in the DRS range of MJ Povey.
They certainly have. And if you notice, whenever we see a camera angle that shows us the sky, it's looking aggressively grey out there. We're seeing bits of sunlight still on the circuit, but when you look up at the sky, it does look very, very dark. I would not be surprised if we have a threat of rain and maybe a small shower, but whether or not we end up having the full shebang, well, that's something that the drivers will know a great deal more than we do at this stage. And one battle that's very close at the moment is Chicken Sucker versus Mako. The battle for 7th place at the moment. The Aston Martin and the Haas going through the hairpin right now. And Mako does not have DRS on Ruprath in front. So they have closed up to Ruprath on the exit of the corner there, and will close up all the way down the straight. I think Ruprath must have had a mistake somewhere, but they don't have DRS. They won't get it down the start-finish straight either. And so this could potentially be an opportunity here for Chicken Sucker if they can keep it well behaved. And I say all that, they get a 3-second time penalty over the corners, over the bumps. And now, as they head down in towards turn number 1, there's not been enough pace there, and Ruprath going very, very, very slowly. I don't know if this is maybe a tactic between the Hasses to try and slow up Mako in the Aston and then give Chicken Sucker that opportunity to overtake, or whether Ruprath has just made a big mistake somewhere, and as a result is now fighting the car a bit more.
Yeah, I'm trying to take a look at Ruprath specifically. There are a few corners where you can kind of have a little touch of the wall if you go just a hair deep, not catastrophically so, but you get that kind of lime green wing damage marker, and could be costing him time because he was pretty much on pace with Wild Poros for a large portion of it, and now is just dropping off the back. So could be some non-visual levels of damage on that front wing, which is oh so important in getting the car turned in for a lot of these chicanes.
Absolutely, and if their plan is to try and hold up Mako so that their teammate can get by, I have a suspicion that's not going to work this time. If anything, I think that Mako might now be in prime place to be the one of these three that makes an overtake here. Down towards the final chicane they go. Ruprath's rear light is also flashing, whereas it's not on the Aston Martin. So now, as they power through the final chicane then, up towards the Wall of Champions, Ruprath very close to the Wall of Champions. And now DRS open, no overtake being used by the Aston. And no overtake this time, but at least the Aston having DRS there has protected them from Chicken Sucker behind.
Yeah, while this was going on, Clem of the lead group, and I saw a big slide from Rupert there, but Clem picked up 3-second time penalties. So of the leading pack now has time penalties, and they're just starting to pour in. Alfie's got one now. Queasy's picked one up. So there's lots of those 3-second time penalties starting to pour in. We've had not a lot of impact from time penalties so far this season that we would expect. But this race, I think we may have to be doing some mental math as we get into the closing laps.
Potentially. It might be something worth doing. Crusoe also picks up a 3-second time penalty as the battle for 6th place, as it is now, is hotting up even more, because now Mako is within 2/10 of the Haas in front then. And as they go into the hairpin, they go a bit deeper, but get the car turned around nice and quickly and rotated well. And now they are going to have the DRS. And in fact, they've got so much overspeed, they're going to be alongside before the DRS even opens on their car. And now, with no flashing light on the back of their car, flashing light on the back of Ruprath, though, that is a move made. And that means that Mako goes up into 6th place in this race. And that means that they are pushing on to try and get onto the back of the Ferrari next of Wild Poros, who's doing very, very well, it must be said. Very, very good drive from them after a very impressive opening lap.
Yeah, and it looked like there was a bit of wheel spin from Ruprath on the exit. And of course, we're seeing as Habs fan Nick just got ahead of Alfie. You can see how you get that first DRS into the detection point. And you carry it down the pit straight, very close between the Alpha and the Ferrari, trying to go for the up and under, the cutback. And I don't think Queasy has quite got it. Sorry, mixing up my alphas. But Xbox v Xbox battle between Habspan Nick and Queasy Pluto. They fought quite a bit last season, so they know how each other drives, and it's very close there, but it's still staying close with that battle for 6th place as well. Mako's around. Mako has made a mistake.
Oh, no.
Let's see if we can find him. And yeah, it is out of that tricky second to last chicane. It's what turns 7 and 8. I don't know.
8 and 9.
8 and 9. There's a kink somewhere on this track that is classified as a corner, and I'm not sure where it is. I think it's after the hairpin, because I know the hairpin is turn 10.
I think it's between. I think there is a kink here that we're just about to see Mako go through, or have seen Mako go through rather, as you get onto the straight. But I also think there's another kink. I think there's one between turns 2 and what I call turn 4, which is where Castleman is currently going through at the moment.
Yeah, I think that is correct as well. I don't know. Yeah. It seems like F1 tracks, they just flip a coin whether something's a turn or not. They just kind of choose it. But well,
like
this three-way battle. Well,
it's not a turn at all in a Formula 1 car.
Exactly. But we had the 3-way battle with Mako. He had a spin and dropped out, and now Ghali's attaching himself to the back of this fight with the Haas team. So there's still quite a battle for P6. It's just rotating cast of characters so far. And Clem has definitely lost some touch with MJ Povey. He had gotten it to about 7/10, and there's local yellows, I believe. Is that F50 off the circuit, or is that Cryptic struggling? That's Cryptic, who's had a very, very rough day.
Yeah, race to forget, I think, for Cryptic. They're a lap down. They are No front wing on their car at the moment as well, and it's all basically looking a bit like it's what might have been race for them after good qualifying performance, getting right up there with everybody else, but just that little bit of inconsistency in the race and getting into incidents there. May or may not have been their fault, who knows? I certainly don't, but yeah, into the pits they go, and I suspect this might be a retirement coming for the Alpine, and yes, it is.
Yeah, and it's tough because he didn't get his last run of qualifying in because of that late disconnect, and by the time he was reconnected, the qualifying session was over, so he wasn't able to get strategy set properly. Basically had to start on cold tires and has made it a very tough day. Gali picking up another 3-second time penalty. So that's going to make that battle a little tougher. And so it turns into basically a fight for the hats. Although now Ruprecht has a 3-second time penalty. So will we see every driver on the grid get a time penalty?
Well, it's certainly possible. I think that we might be looking at something like that. Of course, that then is where the real skill will end up showing out, where we see drivers who are able to keep it on the black stuff without overstepping the marks and not getting penalties. I'm thinking the likes of Nick. I'm thinking the likes of Karsman and Povey. Those three drivers very, very good at keeping the car very much out of a penalty situation when it's come to.
Castleman has come into the pits. The only one of the top three to start on the medium tires, so he's making his switch to hards about where you would expect it. 15 laps in, those hard tire runs you should see go to about lap 20 or so. But first the leaders to blink, and in comes Gali, and looks like a move trying to be done. Queasy, Havshan Nick side by side with people through the wall of champions all day. This time holds the position just barely, although the second run of DRS I think will be pretty much curtains for that position. Although he's holding the inside, nope, he's got to tuck in. But Nick just side by side with people all day today.
Absolutely, they're getting their elbows out. And I tell you what, someone who wants to get their elbows out, I suspect, is Castleman. They've come out betwixt those not Alfa Romeos, those Hasses that have been scrapping with one another and with other drivers in the field as well. And I think for the former race leader, they do not want to be stuck behind a couple of, and no disrespect to them, but a couple of slower cars, as we've seen so far in this race. Let's see what they're able to do then out of the exit of this hairpin. And getting onto the power with those fresh hard tyres that should be up to temperature at this point. And then, of course, getting the DRS open, potentially activating the overtake as well to make sure they get past Chicken Sucker. Chicken Sucker pulls over to one side, knows that their fight is not with the former race leader, and so allows them by, tucks back in behind, so then that way they can get a bit of slipstream from the Red Bull to stay ahead of their teammate who's round, and Ruprecht into the wall. But whilst they've lost the end plate on the front wing, they have not lost any more than that. They've still got DRS, amusingly enough, as they trundle on down the start-finish straight. But yeah, apart from local yellows, no safety car, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, just, it's such a tough corner. People have been making mistakes all day, and more time penalties rolling in. I think I've seen 3 more time penalties in the last couple seconds. Luke did come in, so they have come out just ahead of their teammate Mako, luckily not behind anybody. So now we will see what kind of impact Castleman's able to make. Povey has 13 seconds on the Red Bull at the moment, and like we were saying, about a 16-second or so time loss in the pits here. Very short, since you basically skip the last chicane and skip turn 1. Not a whole lot of time lost. It's one of the few tracks where you could potentially make a 2-stop work timing-wise, but it's such a tough track to overtake on that you probably wouldn't see it.
Yeah, potentially not. And as we continue to watch then, with Luke headed through the hairpin, and then, of course, being closely followed by their teammates as they blast down the back straight now. The question will be, is there a presence in the Aston Martin voice channels here between the two teammates to say, do not overtake Luke. Luke is on brand new tyres. They will pull away from you. And whether or not Mako would listen to that instruction if it in fact were given. As it is, I think that by their teammate being just that little bit ahead for now after coming out of the pits has actually saved Mako from any counter-attack by Alfie here. And so they offset in tyres then about 16 laps. And so we will watch then as to what happens over the next few laps in terms of when those hards on the older tyres start to maybe drop off. But I tell you what, as far as Castleman is concerned, they've made a huge impression because they have gotten their gap to Poros down from 3 seconds at the start of this lap to now 1.1 seconds.
Yeah, those fresh hard tyres doing work. Ruprecht into the pit lane, had to go the entire lap around with that damaged front wing, unfortunately, but it was about on time for him to make a pit stop. He's onto the medium tires, should get to the end of this race pretty easily. You can take them almost 20 laps. So it should be able to get to the end and maybe show a little bit of pace, although that extra little bit of time lost with the damaged front wing. Castleman not quite in DRS at the last detection point, so even though he's now 0.7 of a second down the straight, still wasn't quite enough to get the DRS first time by, and now is going to have to wait a little while, I think, unless Poros does what Chicken Sucker did and jumps out of the way to not fight, although it's not an easy place to overtake through this middle part of the track, or the early part of the track. It's a lot of just cutbacks side by sides, and Castleman definitely has the launches out of the corners. You can see how much extra speed he's got. Should be this next DRS zone, but he's lost about 7 corners worth of following behind a Ferrari.
So then as we go, and to the inside all of a sudden with the Ferrari, the Red Bull, despite the fact that it's got not much ERS on board from the flashing red light at the back there, suddenly sides its way past the Ferrari, and that then means that they are now up into the next position. So along they go then down into the hairpin at the end of the circuit, and well, let's take a look at this then and see how things go. So will they have the purchase on their side to be able to drive away?
I've cursed another
dear,
one. I went to look at the battle between Mako and Alfie since Luke had extended the gap, and not two corners later, Alfie was around.
I tell you what, though, that means that our favourite, I was about to say our favourite Ferrari driver, that's very unfair to Poros, but our other favourite Ferrari driver, as Poros goes into the pits, Habs fan Nick is now up into P10 as a result of that incident there for Alfie, so good recovery for them for a race which has not really gone their way, and they're now into the pits themselves.
Should be plenty of time between the two Ferrari drivers, not get held up at all from the double cycle. Look how fast they came out of the garage. Incredible.
Yeah. That is,
where's that Ferrari team?
Exactly. I don't know what pasta they've been having, or mascarpone sauce or whatever, but I'll tell you what then, car 46 has been able to get serviced molto bene.
I think they just had like espresso spaghetti right there.
Exactly. Well, could you even imagine? Good Lord. That'd be a horrible flavour. But there we go then. So while Poros then out on new tyres, Habs fan Nick out on new tyres, both on a set of mediums to take their Ferraris to the end of this race and hopefully give an awful lot of overtaking action in the meantime, as well as, well, Poros in particular. Now their tyres should have come up to temperature at this stage. If not, then they'll be very close to being.
Povey
go
is
down
in,
into the
Clem has stayed out.
Interesting. Now, could that be a different strategy there? So Povey is in onto medium tyres. Now, the thing which I was wondering was with Clem, because those soft tyres will go 11 laps and the hards will go for around about 24, 25 laps or so. We've obviously had a virtual safety car and a full safety car in that time. Will Clem maybe try the hard to soft strategy? Is that viable?
I think you'd need to save a fresh set for it to be particularly viable, but it's not outside their own. Oh no! That's Clem around. That local yellow is Clem facing the wrong way, so any kind of strategy talk. And
oh yes, it is. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong Red Bull. I was
any kind of strategy talk is kind of out of the question now because Clem has made the mistake. Now when they make their pit stop, they're going to fall almost behind. They should fall behind Wild Poros, and they'll be fighting for a top 5 finish now.
Absolutely, and they're now going to be trying their absolute best to keep MJ Povey behind whilst they try and finish out this lap. Now, just taking a look at Clem's car then, doesn't look as though it's damaged at all, so they won't at least have to replace the front wing, so it should still be a quick stop, but given that they will have now lost so much time, I mean, they've lost a whole pit stop, you can tell, just from seeing the gap between them and Povey, who has stopped, and yeah, into the pits comes Clem. Dear oh dear, 16 seconds now, that's going to drop them all the way down to, maybe as far down as Bonhomie, actually. No, it isn't. Actually, no, that's a total lie. It's going to drop them down to around about where maybe sort of Elliott, Galley, and F50 are. I'm talking nonsense once again, FRS. I do apologise. But away we go. And Poros then makes up a position with Clem in the pits. The Ferrari going through turns 1 and 2 right now. And then further back, we can see this battle here that is shaping out between the Mercedes, the AlphaTauri, and the Alpine, which might potentially now be joined by the Red Bull coming out the pits into turn 2. There they go. They've not quite been able to get past those drivers, but they've got fresher tyres. And once they get those tyres up to temperature, of course, they will then have, of course, the speed that saw them through as a threat to the potential win here today. So that's something to just keep an eye on as this battle unfolds here. But, well, if you were Elliott, you wouldn't necessarily want to be looking in your mirrors right now because there's 3 very angry cars behind you. But right behind, there is a fight between Gali and F50. And Gali has been summarily executed there by F50. The Alpine moves up into P7. And with a fresh set of medium tyres on, I'd expect them to be able to make fairly quick work of Elliott as well, even on this lap. And further behind, Clem has gone for the move, and it's too deep! They've gone too deep in the corner. Tyres still not up to temperature, I suspect, and they have hit F50 in the corner. That means that they lose the position back to Gali. They lose that time they had gained relative to Elliott, and they've got all that work to do again, and Clem then might even have damage on the front wing of their car there as well.
Yeah, and a good chance of being smacked in the steward's room for that one as well. So it's gone from bad to worse for Clem. They've managed to stay ahead of Bonhomie. Of course, Bonhomie on very old hard tires, just like Elliott. So last couple holdouts on the hard tires. They can still do about another 5 laps, those hards. Maybe they're gambling for that late race safety car. Of course, we had that lap 1 safety car and then a VSC, but so far it's been green flag racing the rest of the way. About 12 laps left to go, and it looks like just behind Mako and Bonhomie scything it up a bit, but you can see just the grip that those medium tires have being on a fresh car there, and just absolutely dispatches with Bonhomie. So how much longer do you gamble the hard tires and hope for a safety car, or do you just kind of take your medicine and hope to recover?
Well, that is the question, and for Bonhomie, they need to start thinking about the answer. And for our fight out at the front of the field, whilst we don't necessarily need to look at this right now because we've got this interesting battle going on between Gali, F50 and so on, that is a gap that is progressively coming down, but not by as much as we saw in the inverse in the first stint. And now up the inside goes F50. They are angry Alpine. It's a bit like Fernando Alonso driving that car, and Clemens retired from the session. They've left the session as well. A race to forget for them. I think they knew that the penalty was coming and would drop them down the order in this one. They might also have picked up damage somewhere. A bit of a skatey, slidey Alpine through turn number 2 there and up through 3. Now as they reach turn number 4, then turning in and throwing the car into there. They are still very close to the back of Elliott here. I would imagine that there's an odds-on chance for them to make the move down this next DRS straight in just a couple of corners' time.
Yeah, Gali working very hard around a bunch of cars that have much grippier tires than him. Kind of fighting a losing battle with the mediums, and now F50 very much putting the pressure down to the inside on Elliott and has gotten that move done. Has cost Elliott some pace though, and Gali is tucked right up beneath and it could get very interesting down into turn 10. One of our action zones. Does Gali lunge for it? No, he stayed back just a little bit, but deep is Elliott. He's gone a little too far into the corner. Can Gali get the drive? It's got a bit of a drive on the corner exit, and it's very close side by side now. The Aston getting involved. Mako has got the run on the bunch of them, and I think Mako's about to get boxed in. It looks like he's cleared Gali, but he could have kind of been boxed into a you can't overtake it. Oh, there's contact! Mako's into the back of Elliott. Elliott manages to get the car stopped before it slides all the way to the racing line, but luckily Elliott able to cut straight across and into the pit lane. Although I don't know if he picked up damage. It was about due time though. 23 lap old hards. May as well get him off.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to get spun round, then at least you may as well act on it and get the benefits of a new set of tyres. Now, what Elliott is able to do between now and the end of the race is anybody's guess, but I'm not too sure myself. Meanwhile, Queasy, Pluto and Mako are having a good little scrap with one another after all that happened there between Mako and Elliott. And look at that then, Queasy just able to drive straight on past Gali as though their car was stood still. Look at that. That was brilliant bit of driving there from Queasy on the fresh set of tyres, or fresher set of tyres.
Gali having to bail out across the runoff, which had already caught Nick out. So,
dear oh dear. Well, it looks like for F50, whilst the Alpine curse may still be in operation, it's not as bad as it usually is. They're up into P6. They seem to have a quick car underneath them. They now need to make up 5.5 seconds to the back of Chicken Sucker in front. Meanwhile, further down, we've got Mako versus Gali. Round 2, Electric Boogaloo, and, well, this time the Aston Martin comes on very quickly and goes straight into the pit lane. They both go in.
Was that...
Now, why would they be doing that?
That is an interesting call.
Unless Mako was going in to get a new front wing, possibly. Yep, they go in for a new front wing,
And had the
then was
inside.
Gully just not? Were they just not able to turn in to the corner because Mako was there?
Well, well, looking at it, the braking zone for the corner is at about the 100-meter board. The braking zone to slow yourself down for pit entry is about the 50-meter board. So if you're taking the corner and even if you're on the outside, you're still hitting the brakes a good 50 meters ahead of somebody coming into the pit. So they should filter. I think they might both have just opted because Gali was getting eaten up on the hard tires. I think he realized hard tires are just not the option at this stage of the race. So I feel like it was chosen. I mean, it could very well be possible that you get pinned to the outside. It's one thing you have to be concerned about. But up forward, Alfie now putting some pressure on Bonhomme, who's still on those hard tires, and it's an easy move into turn 10 because you just can't slow those hard tires that are that old as quickly as a set of fresher mediums.
I have a weird feeling that Bonhomme is trying to take those to the end.
He hasn't made a pit stop yet, though. He has to make a pit stop.
Has he not?
He's showing
Those
his no
tires are-
stops.
But those tires are 25 laps old. They're about to be 26.
But the
And we're on
leaders...
Oh, yes. No, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, sorry. I'm getting that completely wrong.
It's numbers. It's weird.
Yeah, math. Who cares?
I think he's just praying at this point for a safety car to bolt on some softs and try and charge through. Because even if at this stage, if he makes a pit stop, he'll fall right to around where Mako is, although Mako on a fresh set of mediums should be eating that gap up quite significantly. So he'll be right back in that fight with Mako, Elliott, Gali, which is still quite a battle.
It certainly is. And F50 gets another time penalty then for track extensions.
As does Elliott.
Another one for Elliott as well, who, oddly enough, came out the pits and then saw just ahead of them coming out the pits Mako, the driver who ended up putting them in the pits by accident. So, by accident, we would hope at least. Hope it's not a deliberate punt up the back there into the final turn. But
Bonhomme down another position to Ruprath, who, again, those hard tires just have no pace left. But out at the front, it's a 1.6 second gap now. As it looks like Chicken Sucker has opted for... No, not the pit lane. Chicken Sucker's had a spin. It was slow going right near the pit entry area, so I think he may have... I thought he might have come into the pits, but no, there was local yellows. So Chicken Sucker's had a bit of a spin. He's carrying 14 seconds worth of time penalties, which is not ideal, to say the least.
It's not ideal, but it's not quite Dan Gilligan Div 5 at Hungary levels of penalties.
I still like to maintain that you were taking an avant-garde expression of the track limits.
I was. For those not in the know, there was over 25 seconds worth of penalties, I think. Maybe even over 30, who knows.
Gali's around in turn one.
And Habs fan Nick manages to get the move done on that third DRS straight. Nice and easy. Or second DRS straight, I should say.
He's still going to have the attention of Chicken Suckers in the detection point, but at this point, you know Nick is happy to do math and see that Chicken Sucker has 14 seconds of time penalty. If Chicken Sucker is quick enough to close the gap to Queasy, who's carrying 3 seconds, he may be happy to just trade DRSs with Chicken Sucker to just eke that gap down. And now Povey can see, and just for a moment was within 1 second. And as we've seen all season, red lights flashing on Castleman and Povey's cars. They love to absolutely rag the battery all day.
They do. They very much do. And this time, I think that maybe it was very close. If he gets the DRS here, it was by the skin of his teeth. And if he doesn't, it was by the skin of his teeth. It was very, very close as they went across the detection point. Let's wait and see. And yes, it is DRS open on the Williams. All of a sudden, it's been building up for a few laps ever since really Povey went into the pits for their medium tyres. And, now we've got a bit of a fight on our hands here, I think, as they cross the start-finish line, and the gap is now down to just 0.6 of a second. Fight for the lead, anybody?
It's definitely gotten interesting very, very quickly, and you know, we kind of saw shades of it leading up to this point with all the medium tire runners kind of putting the hard tire runners down in the midfield pack, and now all of a sudden, is Castleman looking at his hard tires and looking at Povey's mediums and going, I don't know if they have enough grip to stay, because the pace that Povey's showing, the grip he's got out of these corners, the medium tires just don't seem to degrade all that much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, around this track, they are the softest type of compound available that Pirelli produces. But with it being a street circuit, there's just not that much abrasion here, or certainly a park circuit more than a street circuit. But yeah, not too much abrasion on this surface, and so therefore, when you've got tires that are just that bit conservative in their construction, a bit sturdy, as Crusoe
was
retires
out
from the session, and
he's
that's
crashed.
parked in a dangerous place. So maybe
It's
we
been a
might see
long
a
yellow.
safety car.
Usually it would call it by now. I think it's going to just stay a local yellow. I think we're going to be staying green flag, but Povey... Oh, it is a full safety car right as the leaders pass the pit entry. Right.
Povey will be absolutely seething with that. And not only that, but Luke and Wild Poros in particular are now going to be salivating. They are going to be getting very excited.
Had made his stop. Bonhomie made his stop. He had to make it like 2 more laps, and he would have had the safety car he was gambling on. But now, Luke on down, because also the safety car got out of the pits quick enough that the leaders didn't pass them, because otherwise they would have just driven to a delta for the full lap. So now you've got Castleman on 15-lap old hards, Povey on 10-lap old mediums. Everybody's going to come in and grab a set of boots, whether those are mediums or softs.
Except they're 50, apparently.
A 50, interesting choice. Maybe out of tires, although I think he's only made one stop. He's only made one stop, so he should, at the very minimum, have an extra set of mediums available to him, which we've seen have been a phenomenal race tire. Habs fan Nick and Alfie have stayed out. It's a lot more drivers staying out than I would have expected.
And given that we're so close to the end of the race as well, this is a situation where it might end up becoming a bit of a private race between, say, the top 4 or 5 cars, because the safety car, of course, I mean, we've already mentioned it, this is a very short circuit. The safety car will not stay out for very long in terms of the total time that it's out there on the circuit. But in addition to that, we're, of course, very close to the end of the race. The game always leaves at least 2 laps of full running at the end, even if you've got a safety car.
Castleman's in. Castleman has chosen to go for the pit stop, which I think is his only option. He's probably going to lose ground to Luke, maybe not F50 because of the way the pit lane exits. And everybody's should be F50's in, so it doesn't matter as much. So he's finally come into the pit lane, probably a lap too late.
Although Poros might just have enough pace here to get by Castleman. It depends where Castleman reaches the pit lane speed limit. And where they come out, it's going to be very close between them,
he's
actually.
Hit the line
maybe
and
not
he's
that
ahead.
Close, in fact. Yeah, just ahead. So about 2 seconds shy for Wild Poros, which is a shame for them. But I'll tell you what, now all of a sudden, Povey is going to be sweating a little bit.
Yeah, as resilient as the medium tires have been in race conditions, I think 11 laps versus no laps on softs is still going to be a significant enough gap.
Yeah. And when you bear in mind, of course, as well, this is unlike other occasions in FRS races where we've got a tyre that registers as 11 laps, and usually we can point to the fact that there's usually plenty of safety cars in a race, or virtual safety cars, and go, well, they've got X amount of laps of tyre saving on there. No. These have all been 11 full race laps, and not only that, he's been pushing reasonably hard to try and get onto the back of Castleman to then have the opportunity to have a go at least a couple of times before the end of the race here. Now, we are starting to get more cars joining the back of the snake here, including Alfie, who has decided to go for 12-lap-old mediums instead of fresh softs like everybody around them. So expect to see them be something of a roadblock to those behind at the race restarts. And Povey then, it goes from looking like a masterstroke of strategy to now being the victim of their own success in a way, where they could have gone in with Castleman. There would have been nothing really to lose by doing that. They would have lost a couple of positions, of course, but as you can see, Castleman's come out ahead of Poros by 2 seconds, and Luke would therefore be the only car in front of them. So Povey would just need to do what they would have needed to do anyway on Castleman, and they would need to do that and on Castleman as well. It could be that Castleman fighting Luke could have created an incident, and then Povey could have driven straight through. Of course, when 2 cars are fighting ahead of you, it becomes very easy for you to then actually be able to take advantage of both of them being offline, take the correct line, take all the speed in the world, and pass both of them in a couple of corners.
Absolutely, but as it stands, Povey's going to have quite the effort. Now, one person I'm looking down the field at in their home race, Habs fan Nix, who's sitting there with no penalties, surrounded by people with time penalties. So Habs fan Nick looks to be on for a top 5 finish at this stage. Because there's only going to be about 2 racing laps. We should get the safety car called in this lap. I think the game requires 2 green flag laps no matter what.
Yes.
But it does look like the entire snake has been able to form. Elliott reattaching to the back, and there is that message, safety car in this lap. So now it's where, you know what, I'm not even going to do all the mental math because it's just there's too many penalties to account for. We care about the top 5 right now because that is clean so far. Povey, Luke, Castleman, Wild Poros not carrying any time penalties. And of course, MJ Povey now has the honors of leading this restart, and he's going to need a good one because he needs to try and catch them napping.
He really does. Now, Povey has been very good at safety car restarts, but when you have those now 12-lap-old mediums that need to make it to the end now, they definitely will do that. They're not at risk of tyre failure. And he's gone already. He's gone very early indeed, and I think that the gamble has not paid off. The cars are still within about a half a second of him behind. Luke, Castleman, Poros all following through, and if they are able to just keep it clean throughout these first couple of corners then and not fight each other too hard, they will catch onto the back of Povey as they have already done just in turn 2. So this is going to be I suspect, a photo finish by the end of this one. Let's ride on board then. Povey is deploying absolutely everything. They are trying to use all of the battery, all of the performance that they have got to really pull away from the Aston Martin behind. They're trying to use all of those medium tyres underneath them as well, but the softs have just got so much grip that Luke here is having a great old time. The one saving grace for Povey is that there will be no DRS by the end of this one. There will not be enough laps remaining for that to be reactivated.
Castleman's picked up a time penalty.
Oh dear, Castleman! That means all of a sudden podium for Poros is possible. And if there's a big collision between Povey and Luke, for example, then that would mean we would see a Ferrari win for the first time this season as well. So, out of the chicane they go, out the hairpin rather they go. Down onto the back straight, and Luke then still within a half a second is closing it ever so slightly. The gap between the two drivers here is not really changing all that much, which is a bit surprising given the offset entire performance here. But as they go through, Povey is doing a fantastic job, and Castleman now is so close. They're going to try and turn number 1 up the inside. They go. Luke turns in on them. Oh dear, Luke hasn't really lost too much time there, a couple of tenths perhaps, but you can't do that, I'm afraid. At the turning point, they were very much side by side, and Luke has gone for a move which is just not on. So there we go then, their problem is... it's just compounded for Major Castleman then with their 3 seconds worth of time penalties. So they've got Wild Poros sniffing all around behind them here, and that might be the saving grace that gives Povey the ability to run away here, because we've now just got a few corners to go. It's all going to come down to this. Both the cars, I can tell you, have got low ERS. They're going to deploy absolutely everything down here into the final chicane. And let's see how good the exit is. For Luke, it is a good exit. A very good exit initially, but that second phase of the acceleration, they get an oversteering moment. I think this is going to be MJ Povey here. Povey will power all the way down the back straight, down and towards the last couple of corners. It looks good. It looks very good for MJ Povey. And Luke has to gather it all up again. They make it too much of a mistake, and MJ Povey crosses the line and wins the Canadian Grand Prix. Luke will come home in second, while Poros takes the Ferrari podium, the lesser spotted Ferrari podium in the FRS. Habs Van Nick finishes not quite the top 5, but the top 6, and that, all in all, has been a very exciting Canadian Grand Prix.
Yeah, it just came down to a little bit of a tangle between Castleman and Luke. I think pace-wise, Luke could have been a lot closer, but that little bit of contact between the two of them cost them enough breathing space for Povey to manage to snag the race win. And I think the championship lead is going to flip once again, because Castleman finished 4th, so he's going to fall. Well, he did take the fastest lap, so he is going to pick up 13 points to Povey's 25. So a 7-point or 6-point margin in Castleman's favor, I think, is going to be about a 4-point or a 6-point margin. I don't know. I can't do math right now. My brain's not working. He's a 6-point margin to Povey's advantage now, because it's, 12 points the difference?
Something in that region,
well,
yes. I'm going to just nod and agree with you.
It's 12 points the difference, and they were leading by 6. They should now be trailing by 6. Because that's how math works, right?
Sure.
I like how
I'm
just limping across the finish line here.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what then. Let's put us all out of our misery. So, in terms of the race order, then provisional results, of course, before any stewards' inquiries. We have Povey taking the win here in the Canadian Grand Prix today, then followed home by Luke in the Aston Martin, and then Poros completes the podium for Ferrari. Then from fourth down, we have Major Castleman, Queasy Pluto, Habs Van Neck, F50, Bonahomie, Elliott, Ruprath, Mako, Chicken Sucker, Gali, Alfie, Cruzo, Clem, and Cryptic at the back of the field there. A few DNFs in that one, but not too many. I think we still had 14 finishes there. And in terms of driver of the day for you, who would you say it would be there, Sean?
I'm going to go with... I mean, I don't want to go Pove because it's pole and a win, but he did have to absolutely execute in the final end of the race. He did have to pull that off. I'm going to go with Habs fan Nick, being in the wars all day, creating entertaining action. It's his home race. Give him some credit, and also Wild Poros for that. I'm going to pick Ferrari. I'm going to pick Team Ferrari, Team Canada. That's my drivers of the day because nobody makes the rules here.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, nobody does. Nobody enforces them either. So I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to say that I very much liked the race from F50 today. They'd be one of my two drivers of the day. I think would have finished higher up if they hadn't been tagged a bit in that hairpin because they were very, very close to the back of Elliott. They could have gotten that move done, disappeared off into the distance, maybe even have challenged some of the other drivers further up the field. And then I also was a big fan of the Ferraris as well. Yeah, while Poros and Habs Van Nick, they're two of very few Ferrari drivers over the years, not specifically in the FRS, but just generally speaking in Formula One, that I actually like. So there we go. And adding to that list, we can say Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, and Charles Leclerc. And that's literally about the only Ferrari drivers I've ever liked. But there we go. So, thanks very much for watching, everybody. It's been absolute solid good fun broadcasting this one. Couple of safety cars, one virtual safety car. I think that's about right as far as the flavour, the spice that an FRS race needs. Now, in terms of who is online on Twitch, because I would like us to start raiding people once we're done. With these streams, but of the channels I follow at least, and the channels being recommended to me, there's not really anybody jumping out at the moment. Is there anybody that you would like to raid, Sean?
I've got nobody really on my personal list. I don't spend a lot of time on Twitch aside from this, so...
Yeah, neither do I, really. That's the thing. So I tell you what then, let's leave it for now. We'll just round out the stream. And we'll say thank you very much for watching, everybody. I am Daniel Gilligan. I've been joined today in my third commentary gig of the day by Sean Provenza, the absolutely fantastic individual in the virtual commentary box, who's also made everything look and sound fantastic for you on the stream here today. And from us, thank you very much for watching. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.